Hey Ravi, this is a audio check. I am audible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're audible.
Yeah. Hi, Atre, Chaitanya, Purushottaman. We'll just give a couple of minutes. It's still 2:55. We will exactly start at 3. Kindly just stay on the bridge. Hey, good afternoon, all. We'll just give 30 seconds more for people to join. Otherwise, we'll quickly get started in the next 30 seconds. Hey, hi, we will just get started. So, first of all, a very good afternoon to all of you. Thanks for taking your time out from your busy schedules to attend this webinar. So, let me quickly introduce myself. I am Samira Rao, a CA by qualification, and I am one of the co founders of Paybooks. And I welcome all of you to this webinar. In this webinar, we will look at the various options on handling payroll and what all points you should consider to decide which option is good for your company. Okay, so we will split this webinar into two sections. The first section will be maybe for 40-45 minutes max. This is where I will be taking you through different aspects of payroll outsourcing and how do you compare and how do you decide and what are the options and all of those. And over the last 10-15 minutes, we will have a open Q&A session where we can either exchange ideas or if you have any questions, I can try to answer them. Hope this is fine as the agenda for this webinar. So before we actually move into the main topic of this webinar, let's first see why payroll is very important. And with this knowledge, I'm sure you will be able to appreciate the role payroll plays in the success of your business. So let's first get into why or what is the importance of payroll. I have highlighted 5 reasons. The first reason why payroll is important is because it is associated with the biggest asset of any company, which is the employees. Whether it is a software company, a services company, or a manufacturing or a retail shop, it is the team which matters most to the company's growth and profits. So, a great team is what builds great products or serves customers or brings in sales. And that is, end of the day, the cash and the profits to your business. Moving on, payroll is important because it is the payroll cost is usually the biggest cost element in your P&L. A high cost element, therefore, should not naturally be uh, properly taken care of, as the impact on the overall P&L and the cash flow is very high because payroll is the biggest element. Third, I think is very obvious. Payroll and compliances go hand in hand. They are the two faces of the same coin. So there is no correct payroll without correct compliance, and the cost of compliance or maybe the cost of non-compliance can be very high, leading to penalties and even a jail term. So hence payroll is very important even from a compliance angle too. The fourth point I think is also obvious for any HR person. How the employees view the payroll function in a business decides how they perform, and they also then directly or indirectly impact the profits and cash flows. If your payroll policies are consistent and employee friendly and you pay the salaries each month on the same day and your payroll is usually accurate, then it has a very positive impact on your team. But on the other hand, if you have, say, delayed payroll or incorrect payroll, then employees can quickly get demotivated. And hence, even from the HR angle, payroll is important. And the last point I thought I will highlight on the ethics portion. So, not only the employees, but how the outside world views your company is also mainly sort of dependent on the payroll practices, the employee practices you have. So if you're in the news because you didn't deposit PF or your TDS delays are spread, or people keep talking that you have questionable payroll policies, then it will impact how your company is judged and looked upon by the external world, which could be your industry, your competitors, your VCs, or anybody, right? So not only the employees, even other entities look at your payroll, and they make up a certain opinion about your company. And hence, for all of these five reasons, payroll is important. So now let's look at what are the options you have in managing payroll. So basically, there are three options. I think the first two options are very common. All of you would have already known. And the third is also maybe somebody already is knowing this because it is a emerging concept. So we will get into more details on what are the pros and cons and comparisons of each of these. But just to set the context, let me quickly explain the three options because different people may have different uh, ideas, or they may assign different meanings to these terms. So let's quickly, in a minute, understand what we mean by outsourcing or DIY payroll or co-sourcing. What is outsourcing of payroll? This is where you hire an external agency to handle everything around payroll. So this could be calculating salaries, paying the employee salaries, processing the or even filing the payroll returns, even answering the employee queries. So all of this is under the payroll outsourcing. So why do companies use outsourcing? Because they can take advantage of efficiency, cost savings, and expertise that an experienced payroll provider can bring on the table. So in this case, I mean, just to clarify, you just share the inputs on which employee joined, who left when, or any variable payout to be done, and rest of the stuff is managed by the payroll agency, including PF filing, and even some cases the employee payments are also done by the agency. Let's move on to DIY. DIY stands for do it yourself. This is, or it is also called in-house payroll, as opposed to outsourced payroll. This is in-house payroll. So this is where you have your own team, maybe a HR team or a finance team or a payroll team or a combo of everything. And internally, the team manages all the calculations, payment, compliances, employee queries, and reports and documentation. So everything is done in-house. While this could actually be done on a simple Excel sheet, for the purpose of this webinar, let's rule out manual methods of running payroll, though an Excel sheet is considered under DIY payroll. Let's use only a software tool which runs payroll, which has options to completely automate the payroll. So why do companies choose DIY payroll? Because they will get more control over the process. They can save on costs. Uh, Data security is more in your control, and all of those advantages are there in DIY. So now the last option is the co-sourcing option. As you can see, this is not completely outsourcing, not completely insourcing. It is a mix and match of both outsourcing and DIY. This is where you split the work. Some of the payroll work is done in-house, some of it is outsourced. Ultimately, both the company and the agency agree upon themselves as to the split of responsibilities. This is basically to overcome any disadvantages outsourcing may have or DIY payroll may have, so that you combine both um, the advantages and you sort of mitigate the disadvantages. And this is the new option called co-sourcing. So this gives Flexibility, you have real time access to data, you have an external expert to take care of compliance, but running payroll may be done in house. So, this is a combo of the first two options. So, now let's start with comparing the three options and we'll apply various filters and data points to analyze the options further. I will also try to say, take some practical examples so that the point is clear as to understand the comparison. I think the screen is also pretty simple to understand. You can read through and then also quickly grasp where I am coming at. So, payroll policies. So, let's start with that. So, let's assume you have a payroll structure where basic is 30% of CTC. So, in a DIY scenario, you will continue to use the same policy and keep paying your employees with the same CTC into 30% as basic. But if you had outsourced payroll to a good agency, then the agency will come back and then maybe suggest, hey, your 30% formula may not be compliant for certain reasons. Maybe for the low CTC bands, this will not work out because the basic may drop below the minimum wage limits, or it may cause non-compliance of PF as the basic is dropping below 15K, which is the restricted PF wage. But gross salary is more than 15K, so you will potentially have the PF department coming knocking on your doors telling your PF compliance is not correct. Right. So, in terms of the comparison, you have an advantage of outsourcing because an external expert is coming and then telling you or advising you certain things. Second point on getting set up to run payroll. Assuming you have started a new company or you now want to take a decision and you want to set up the payroll system afresh. So here the expert team in the agency will take care. They will usually review all the policies, systems, and then timelines, and then come back with their suggestions. But in a DIY scenario, the software implementation team may do the work, but really they will not get into pointing out changes or improvements or compliance impact on various policies you may have. I think scope is pretty clear. In the last slide itself, we understood what is outsourcing, what is DIY. So pretty much the agency is responsible for anything to do with payroll in the outsourcing option. Right from the first step to the last step, usually the agency takes care of everything. But in a DIY scenario, all the scope of included in the payroll is your responsibility, your meaning the internal team. It could be the HR team, it could be the payroll team, it could be the finance team, or all three teams in a big company, but everything is in house. In a co-sourcing, this is actually the beauty. You can control the scope and distribute the scope, and you get to decide who handles what. What does the agency do? When will it do? How will it do? What are the balance steps, and when your team or who in your team will do. So this is the advantage of the scope bifurcation in co-sourcing. I think the last point on employee self-service is common. All three options give this option. Just to clarify, there is a ESS portal where employees can log in either on the mobile or on the web, and then can access their payslip, apply for a leave or a reimbursement. A manager can approve. You can look at the Form 16 and holiday list, and uh, if it is the income tax module, then you can get to choose which regime you want to opt and all of those. Next is a very important point, actually, the access to data. Okay, in an outsourcing scenario, the control you have on your own data is actually limited because the agency is using its own software or some other software, and you have either no access or very restricted access to the data within that system. But in a DIY scenario, you have complete control, and co-sourcing, obviously, you can specify and then decide the bifurcation. Just to give a practical example on this access to data, suppose you have outsourced payroll, and at 4 p.m., you have a PF officer visiting your company for a surprise check. And then the first thing he will ask is, sir, please give me all the attendance reports and your salary registers and the PF forms and the challans for the past 15 months. Right? That is a typical question a PF officer will have. If you have DIY payroll, then all the data is in your company, in your account, and even if you're using a cloud application, all the data is accessible by you whenever you want. But if you have outsourced payroll, then you will have to call up your payroll manager, and then he will tell, okay, sir, noted, I will get back with the data when it is ready. Because that manager is accessing or working on multiple accounts, including your account, he will take his own sweet time, maybe the same day, next day. Again, depends on your SLA, TAT, and all of those. So that is the point I wanted to highlight on access to data. I think the rest of the points are pretty simple. Employee queries, tax proof verification. I think in outsourcing, it is all done by the agency, but otherwise, you have to internally do it in a DIY scenario. Co-sourcing, obviously, you can tell the agency to do the verification. The last point is also very crucial in that sense. We are increasingly in an age of privacy of data and protection of data. There are rules, I think GDPR may be a term you have heard of. Even in India, this is coming in a very big way. There are a lot of fines and penalties if there is a data breach. So, usually in an outsourcing scenario, all the data you need to share. I mean, you will be sharing employee name, his bank account, his PAN, his Aadhaar, his salary, everything, right? Uh, so the control you have on the data is limited in an outsourcing because you are usually doing this data sharing either through email or any other means. If it is through the application, it is well and good, but otherwise, most of the agencies ask data and give data over email. But there is no data sharing at all in a DIY scenario, hence, data security is, I mean, a lot higher. Even in co-sourcing, you end up with sharing some data, and hence the control you have on data security is, in that sense, limited. I think the last slide on a comparison is on uh, how much of time you spend and what are the skills you need to have your own payroll or depend on a DIY tool, or if you are doing co-sourcing, what will you do? Right. So this is maybe a summary of all the pros and cons. In outsourcing, you can sit back and relax because the agency is doing all the heavy lifting, crunching, number crunching, and calculation, and confusion, and compliance. Everything is taken care of. You just need to give data and expect the output. Right? Output also is supposedly to be checked by the agency before sharing it to you. So the time you spend on payroll and compliance activities is very, very minimal. On the other hand, it is maximum in a DIY because your team is doing everything. Of course, it can be split in the co-sourcing scenario. Even if you have a very small team, a person who is not an expert in PF or ESI, you can still outsource, still comply with everything because an agency is taking care of everything. But if you want to move it in-house, then you will have somebody who is an expert in payroll and compliance and income tax and PF, ESI, right? He should at least know the basics and know when to contact an expert if there is a confusion or a clarification he needs. If you have, say, only one HR, and if you have outsourced payroll, that HR can look at better value added work than just work on payroll. So that is the ability to work on core HR functions, on retention and attracting talent and ensuring the talent is happy. So all of those is possible in outsourcing, but since you are responsible for payroll in the middle option, your ability to work on these HR aspects is very, very limited. I've also summarized the cost. Outsourcing based on again your headcount, higher the headcount, lower the cost. But typically, if you take a 100, 200 employee company, this is a good range of 100 to 200 rupees per employee per month is what will be the cost in outsourcing. Between 40 and 75 rupees will be the cost in DIY scenario, and somewhere in the range of 75 and 150, this is in between outsourcing and DIY, will be the cost in co-sourcing. I've also highlighted the risk aspect of the three options. So now we understood what are the options, and we just did a quick comparison of various options within the outsourcing, DIY, and co-sourcing. Now we will get on to how to choose. Right? We have seen the three options, we have compared them, but how do you really make a choice? What points should you consider when deciding? Okay, so I have taken a Q and question and answer route to make this as simple as possible. So for a given situation or a scenario or a company, I've tried to give the best answer. So I have limited the choices to OS, which is outsourcing, and DIY. Sorry, I have a sore throat, just recovering from a cough and uh, fever bout. So pardon me for my coughs. But on the co-sourcing, we will separately discuss it at the end of the session. But ultimately, I have tried to highlight the OS and DIY options given different scenarios. So you will, based on where your company is right now or in the immediate term, you will be able to apply these and then make a decision. Of course, multiple scenarios may apply to your company, or you may have a completely different scenario because it is a corner case. But basically, this is sort of a guide which can help you decide which is the better option. Okay. I will also try to give some practical examples and then to drive home the point. So let's take the first point on complex pay structure and policies. We have this Coal India, right? You've heard of them. They are in the mining business, coal mining business. Very, very unique business. And you won't believe the complexity they have in payroll. Just to give a simple scenario, so the campus is spread over hundreds of acres. Right, in a small office, you will have a biometric machine. The moment an employee comes, he punches in, and then that is the time when he started office. But this Coal India has a campus which is hundreds of acres, right? So employees enter the campus from different gates. The time they take to enter the shaft from the gate again depends or differs from gate to gate or shaft to shaft, and then from the shaft they go underground. That is when the actual work starts. Okay, different employees work in different underground levels. So monitoring the in time and the out time or the work time itself is complex here. I mean, if they take a break, a 15-minute break is maybe typical in other companies, but here, by the time the guy comes from the lowest floor to the shaft and then goes to the canteen, it will be half an hour. So monitoring in time, out time, the OT calculation, cap on the max OT hours, good attendance bonus. I mean, I can give multiple scenarios. So calculations are very, very complex. So we have one more manufacturing company in the chocolate manufacturing business. So they have a cooperative society of arecanut and cocoa produce. They have different processes from plucking, packing, sorting, grading, repacking, gunny bag, stitching, weighing, right? So each process has a different rate card, and there is a standard output rate measured sometimes in kg, sometimes in number of gunny bags, sometimes in number of lifts you do. So the point ultimately I wanted to come is quickly, if you have complex rules and policies, then don't outsource. It will never work out. You are better off in having your own policies and systems to handle payroll in house. So now I think that also answers the second point. In if your segment is a very unique segment, then uh, DIY may not work out, right? And if you have a team where people are constantly changing jobs, if you have a payroll team where the team members, for whatever reason, keep changing jobs and there is no continuity, you are better off in outsourcing payroll. Because then the outsourcing agency will own the responsibility of the continuity. Again, I think this is the fourth point also on the same lines. I'll skip that. Okay, let me take the next point of multiple teams in the company handling different aspects of the payroll. I was handling payroll of Deccan Airways, Kingfisher Airlines, if you all remember. So they had outsourced payroll and it never worked out for them because they were in a very high growth phase, and they had to hire the expat pilots, air hostesses, baggage handlers, multiple people, right? Apart from the normal office people. And their operations was spread out in multiple states. So by the time the payroll team sitting in Bangalore got the inputs of new joinees from different branch offices and shared it with the outsourcing agency, you can imagine 2 months of payroll would have already gone by. Or in some scenarios, the employee for whom you're getting the data as a new joinee, he would have already quit the company or he would have got fired. So if there are large teams and different teams handling different aspects, I mean, you have a different team to do the onboarding, pre-onboarding, onboarding. Somebody gives out the appointment letter. There is a different team giving the badges, and there is a different team doing payroll. There's a different team doing the payments. You're better off in keeping it in-house because you will have a very, very tough time in coordinating everything in the company, plus giving the inputs on time to the external vendor and getting the output back. Okay, so that will not work out. So then moving on the headcount aspect. If you have a very large headcount, then outsourcing may not work. DIY may be the better option. Okay. Uh, Again, moving on, since it was a simple topic, if you have a very small HR or a payroll team, then maybe outsourcing is better instead of keeping it in-house, because you can then have the advantage of an external agency handling everything. Though you're small, your external agency is a big company with multiple team members, so your payroll is all protected. If for whatever reason your internal system uh, results in delayed payroll, erroneous payroll with in-house teams, then maybe it is time to outsource payroll, because then you will have an advantage of an expert team doing all the number crunching, heavy lifting. So maybe outsourcing is better in that scenario. If you are a very hot startup, And the employee experience and branding is very, very important for uh, your business, because your highly funded company and all of those. Then maybe DIY is better, because the external tools available in the market uh, offer options for you to have a very good visibility and branding. So maybe outsourcing in that scenario will not work out. Coming on the cost aspect, if you have a very tight budget, then keep it in house, because outsourcing is going to be costlier than doing it in house. Coming on to the compliance angle, if your payroll or business is in a segment where there is a lot of complexity involved, laws keep changing, and it is very difficult for you to keep track of new legislations, then if you have in-house expertise, DIY, otherwise you have to outsource, because then the outsourced agency will have external experts who can take care of all of those. So in the interest of time, maybe I'll skip the balance three, but it is all covering on integrations and data control and what is your focus and the HR aspect of employee management. So outsourcing is better if you want to focus on your core business and not worry on running payroll, paying employees, filing PF return, then it is better to outsource. If you have a small HR team and the HR is better off in dealing with employee retention, morale, rewards, learning, performance, and all of those, then again it is better you outsource payroll. Okay, so ultimately these 14 or 15 scenarios or options again are very generic. Usually you will have some conflicting points as well applicable in your case. That is, you may have in-house compliance experts, but you may want to spend time on employee retention. So then first point tells keep it in-house, second point tells keep it outsourced. So ultimately you will have maybe some conflicting scenarios as well. And this is exactly why co-sourcing is a good option where you have conflicts, because then you will have an option to control what you want and take the best of both the outsourcing and the co-sourcing. So now let's assume, based on the previous two slides, you decided to outsource payroll. What should you be aware of? What are the typical pitfalls? How to avoid them is what we will cover next. Similarly, we will cover the factors to note while doing DIY payroll or co-sourcing. Okay. Again, this is a very, very important slide. If you actually are able to take away something from this slide and are able to implement, if you have outsourced payroll, you will have a very smooth experience and be in complete control and be compliant, and your employees also happy. So let's spend 2 minutes on this slide. First of all, when you're appointing the agency, okay, the agency is the outsourced agency which will deliver the payroll services for you. Ensure that whatever platform or software the agency is going to use is complete. Uh, it has an ability to handle corner cases when change in salary effective April, but done in September, and again after 2 months you have a uh, retro hike, change in hike on hike. So all of those scenarios will be common. So ensure that there is no manual work done by your agency, because then that will defeat the very purpose of depending on an expert agency. So the agency not only has to have a good name from a service angle, but whatever is the platform they're going to use, that should also be a good platform so that you derive the best benefits from outsourcing. The second point is work talking on the data control and access. We saw in the previous slides that if you have outsourced payroll and you have a PF officer visiting you, you have problem in getting your own company's data. So what you should do with your vendor is to tell and be very, very clear that you also should have access to whatever data the agency is having. It may be a restricted access, but you should have access to, for example, draw whenever you want, whichever report you want, whether it is a salary register or ticket list of open tickets from the employees or a PF register or a Form 16. You should have access to all the data of your own company so that you're able to attend to all unplanned statutory notices, audits. You may have some investor in your own company telling, um, because of this due diligence going on, give me this data. So again, you should not be blinking and then telling, sir, I will need 5 days because my agency will take 4 days to give the data. Okay, the third point talks about the SLA, service level agreement, and the turnaround time. Different agencies offer different SLA and TATs. Ensure that you have some buffer in the agreement so that you don't end up with delayed payment of salaries or compliance has been delayed, because they can have a very big negative impact on the employee morale. Data security, we also saw, is very, very crucial. Ensure that your agency respects your employees' data. They have all the controls, all the certifications, all the policies in house so that the precious data you have is not compromised. Either you can insist on a certification. I mean, you have ISO certification, SOC 2 certification, GDPR, and all of those. So this will be a very, very crucial thing. See, when nothing happens, it is business as usual. But if there is a data breach, then it has a severe impact, a big impact, as big as shutting down the company. So ensure data security is given importance by your agency. Fifth point, I think, is very obvious. Whatever is the cost you are getting into as an agreement, be sure that there is nothing you have not understood or missed out, or be sure that any additional fee, in what scenario it is payable, how much is it payable, when is it payable. So all of those, because payroll has two aspects. One is the monthly regular uh, work, and then there is a quarter ending or half yearly ending or annual ending work. So how do you pay for them? You should be very, very clear. Again, if there is some integration needed because you are using a different HCM application and only payroll is outsourced, you should also be clear on integration frequency, integration cost, maintenance, and all of those. The last point is actually the most crucial. When everything is important, but this is also very, very crucial. See, usually when we outsource payroll, we understand that the agency is responsible for everything, and it is natural tendency for us to sit back and relax because everything is done by an external person and he's getting paid for that. But if you are not in control of when you sent the input, when the first output came, what were the errors either in your input or the output given by the agency? Is it delayed? Is it because you have Friday as a holiday and Monday as a bank holiday? Are you able to sort of pay employees on time, whether on Thursday or on or Tuesday after you have communicated? What is the employee feedback? Are employees keeping silent because you're not able to sort of sort out the issues they're having because the portal is not answered, the employee tickets are not answered on a timely basis? So all of this is something you need to still be in control of. The best thing you should ask is to ask the agency to document everything. So you sort of have a report card for each month. The report card summarizes right from when you gave the input to when the output was finally given to when the PF return, for example, was filed. And this you keep on accumulating, and end of the year, you sit across the table with the agency and show all the 12 report cards, and then you have very, very clear data points to tell the agency that agency has done a good job, or the agency has bungled up in some month or in some aspect. Okay, now we'll quickly move on to what are the factors you should consider while you keep payroll in-house. We'll try to finish it in the next couple of minutes because we are already at 3:40. Uh, when you go for a DIY solution, ensure that the product is a good product. It is able to handle all end-to-end aspects of payroll without any manual work. Because if you end up buying a software or subscribing to a cloud application, but again end up doing manual work on an Excel sheet, uh, uh, the whole purpose of DIY payroll is lost. Ensure that you take a complete demo. Ensure you ask all the questions. You have answers to how to run payroll, or how to draw a report, or how to combine two reports to get a third report. How do you, uh, if you're stuck, how do you uh, come out clean? For example, if you have done the third step first and then you are going back to step one or step two, how will you sort of untangle yourself in the application? So all of those product fitment analysis has to be done very, very thoroughly. Indian payroll or Indian software generally is known to not have a very good UI UX, and hence a good uh, customer support team is needed from the DIY application. So in fact, this is the most important aspect. Even if you have uh, not given full marks in the first 2 points, but if the DIY agency can give a good customer support experience, then that is sort of mitigating the other risks. Okay, then you should also review the employee experience, because all of your employees will be using this DIY application. So good UI, UX, mobile app, all of that is very, very important. Your company will grow, and along with growth comes new requirements. So please check how extensible the software is. Today, you may have a very simple reimbursement policy, but once you grow, you may have a policy which tells, based on the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 city, based on the designation of the person traveling, the TA or DA will change. So your software should be ready to handle all of these aspects as you grow. Again, data security is, I think, the most crucial aspect here. You're completely dependent on a third party to maintain your data. So ensure that this DIY platform has all the certifications needed. So now coming to the co-sourcing, right? So this is, I think, one of the last few slides I have. Yeah, last slide. Good, we are on time. So um co-sourcing is co-sourcing because it is based on a collaborative relationship between you and the payroll agency or a service provider. So here the business is outsourcing payroll that are clearly not core competencies to the company. It could be tax management, it could be system or software maintenance. But at the same time, you get to keep firm control over the aspects of payroll which you want to control, which could be the payroll and the employee data or the employee experience and all of those, right? So you get to choose the best of both the worlds. It is an opportunity to gain control, flexibility, accessibility of insourcing, while you can leverage the benefits of outsourcing by focusing on your core competencies which your business require. So the key is to ensure that you recognize what are the limitations of the current approaches, and then you're in a position to fully assess the cost and the risk associated with either outsourcing or DIY, and hence you're able to do a best mix and match of both, so that whatever drawbacks outsourcing has or whatever advantages insourcing has, you're able to utilize both. So what are the points you should be aware of is again on the screen. This is not going too deep as the previous two options, because you're basically taking the advantage of choosing what you will do, choosing what the agency or a software will do. And hence you're in full control, you have full access, flexibility is there. You're able to focus ultimately on the business and not just on running payroll or paying your employees or on the statutory compliances. Okay. So with this, we come to an end of the comparisons. So this was by Paybooks. Paybooks offers both DIY, a comprehensive suite of features, right from uh, salary calculations to leave and reimbursements to flexible benefits to loans and advances to forms. Everything is there in one good to use, simple to use platform. We also offer outsourcing and co-sourcing services, wherein our experts manage end-to-end payroll, compliance, HR, and if you have co-sourced, whatever options or aspects of payroll you want us to handle is all handled by our expert team. So now we are on time for a set of questions and answers. So please feel free. Ravi, please unmute whichever participant wants to ask a question, or if you can type out the question also, I can then read out the question and then try to answer.
Yeah, sure.
Ravi, if there are already questions somebody has typed out, because I'm sharing my screen, you can read out so that I can try to answer them. But
Yeah, sure.
otherwise, the participants to the webinar, please feel free to ask any questions you may have, or any suggestions you may have. I'll be happy to take feedback and then answer anything uh, as a question you may want to pose. So maybe I'll stop sharing and then see the chat window so that I will be able to read out the questions. Okay. Okay. So are there no questions? Okay. So maybe I'll ask a few general questions. So let me take Atrey Upadhyay. Good afternoon, sir. So in your company, how do you manage payroll? You're on mute. If you want to speak, please unmute yourself. Ravi, you can unmute everybody in one.
Yes, yes, I did.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, so we can end the session. I think we got the answers through poll session, so we can afterwards we can review it.
Maybe just one more minute for others if you have any question to ask.
Yeah, that Kanu Chandran wants to speak. Okay, yes, yes, sir, you can speak. Kanu Chandran. Hello, Mr. Kanu Chandran. Do you have any question?
No, sir, I don't have any questions here.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, all of you. It was a wonderful audience. Thanks for taking your time and patiently going through this webinar. Even if you have any questions or clarifications after this webinar has ended, you can contact us. Paybooks.in is our website. You will have multiple options to contact us. If you need any help, any advice, please feel free to ask. We will definitely come back and then try to answer all of the questions you may have. Okay, thanks. Have a great week. And once again, thanks all of you for attending this webinar. Thank you. We will
Thank you.
now
Both
end
of
the
you.
webinar. Thanks.